Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at some upcoming releases for Team Yankee. It's all gone a bit Scandinavian with the Nordic book, John.
It has, yeah. We've got some very unique, very interesting vehicles. I definitely want to harp on the unique side of things because some of them are just a little bit weird. But very cool vehicles. I think when we have a little look at the stat card, it's going to be quite interesting. I think there's going to be a few people taking up some of these in their forces as well. So
sweet, that's what I like to see. So we have 3 tanks. They work for, well, 3 different nations, although one of them work for both. And I thought it'd be fun to start off with the Finns because they're an unusual combination of material, shall we say, because it's a mix of sort of NATO and
Soviet built, yeah.
Yeah. So what are we looking at here?
Well, first off, we're looking at the T55 Marksman. So what we have under camera now is the sprues, the standard sprues for the T55 kit from Battlefront. So that has everything you need to do all your various T55 models up to the AM2, which is what my East German army has. But the Finns decided, you know, if we had a bunch of these lying around, what do we need for our armored force? And they said, well, we don't have any real dedicated AA. And at the time, Cannon AA was still a thing. So they got this monstrosity of a turret. I believe this is a British-built turret with, I want to say German guns.
I think it's German guns, and I have a sneaking suspicion it's Swiss.
Yeah. Swiss radar
on it, just to really hammer home the eclectic mix that they can put together.
So the Marksman turret was basically the British answer to Gepard, because the Germans started using a lot of Gepards and stuff as their dedicated armored AA, and twin 35mm rapid fire cannons. Like, these things are insane when they actually fire. Not seen a lot of Marksman. Because it was originally put on a chieftain of all things. So you took a really unreliable engine and you put a really weird turret on it.
Yeah.
And it probably didn't keep up with the armored force that well. Maybe the Finns, because they were sticking it on a T55, made it a little bit better. I'd say probably did. It probably actually drove somewhere.
Which is always handy when you need to relocate. You actually have a built version there as well.
I have a built one there as well. So yeah, we'll chuck that under this shot here and see if, there we go. What a weird, weird combination of stuff. You know, you've got the classic T55, and then you've got this utter weirdness of a turret on top.
Well, yeah, it's got a heck of a profile as well.
It does.
Which I always get the reminder of things like the Bradley, where they've got such a high profile that they're not easy to hide. But I suppose these are relatively far back and in a defensive posture for the forces.
I don't know how they were going to use Marksman. I know that for Gepards, they were using them as camp defense and close dedicated AA because the cannons don't have a big range on them. But I think some of the later ones had missiles on them. Marksman turret never seemed to have that.
Right.
But in general, it's more dedicated AA for the game. And if you're going to play Finnish, I think you're going to need some AA, particularly if you're fighting against any Soviet list that has a lot of Fetters and Hinds and all sorts of rubbish.
How many dice does it chuck out? Because I've seen the stats for the actual Marksman said it had an accuracy rate at like over 50%, like 51 or 52% accuracy rate in testing.
Whoa, well.
So,
well, in reality, in game anyway, we have a halted rate of fire of 5 and a moving rate of fire of 4. So it's still pumping out a fair amount of shots in the game as it's being used. It's anti-tank 11, which isn't too bad if you're going to run into a bunch of BMPs and stuff.
Yep, that's true. You can always give ground support with it if there's no aircraft flying around.
Exactly. It comes with the dedicated AA rule and the radar rule as well. So dedicated AA basically means use full rate of fire when firing at aircraft. So it's always going to be firing at rate of fire 5 against aircraft.
Happy days.
And the radar is no to hit penalty for ranges over 16 inches. So it's all good. So long as you're shooting at aircraft, it's going to keep churning out a lot of shots.
Sweet. Well, that's the Marksman, which is a very interesting. I was going to say pretty. It's monstrous.
It's
like,
not pretty.
It's like Frankenstein's monster
Yeah.
coming towards you. But, yeah, if you can't get your hands on a Gepard, then it will do the job.
Yeah.
What's the next country/tank we're going to be looking at?
Well, the next countries we're going to be looking at,
okay.
countries is going to basically be Sweden and Denmark.
Okay.
Because they both used this vehicle, and it's probably one of the most prolific early Cold War vehicles, I would say. This is, of course, the Centurion, and British tank that started service in 1945, just missed World War II by a few months.
Okay.
And it went right through until, I believe, the late 80s, when I think certain countries were still using them and eventually started getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Battlefront have done a superb job on this kit, because they have given you everything from the Mark I right up to what we're going to be talking about in a minute, which is the STRV 104.
Yeah, I was just looking at that.
One.
So it has the multiple turret variants with the mantlets and the like. If you are going to build the earlier versions, it also has the upper deck plate for the engine cover, which is 2 variants of that as well.
Yeah, because you had 2 engines. You had the initial, which was the Rolls-Royce Meteor. I think, the Meteor, and then later on, some countries, particularly Israel, diesel engined them.
Right.
So I believe the Swiss or the Swedish put a diesel engine in it later on in life.
There are 5 different main guns here.
Yeah, so you have everything from 17-pounder, which is the World War II famous gun.
I'm assuming is that one right at the end with the baffle on it.
And then you're going right through the various 20-pounder guns, then up to the 105s, and then the later 105 that has the shroud on it as well, which is that one.
This one right down here.
Yep.
So it's a sprue and a half for the Centurion.
It's a good testament to the tank, to the thing lasted so long.
The longevity of it, yeah. Design them to last, and you get your money back out of them regardless. I'm just looking there at the various Pendle mount machine guns as well. So
yeah, the Mark I, you get that ridiculous 20mm coaxial gun that sits alongside the 17-pounder.
Right.
Very nice tank overall.
Spanking. Shall we take a look at a built one then?
Sure. Let's chuck it in. There we go. So this one's been done up to be the STRV 104, which is the Swedish variant of it. So it has ERA blocks on the front of the hull, and it has a little bit of extra armor on the mantlet as well. Beyond that, not a lot of differences between the various other Centurions, bar your gun, bar a couple of details on the turret and stuff like that. A very tidy kit to put together, very easy to put together, and it's reflected fairly well in the game.
Yeah,
it's a handsome looking vehicle. You can take plenty of them in the Swedish forces, and the Danish allow you for a different variant of it, an earlier variant.
Okay, how did the build go for you? Because this, obviously, the Marksman is a mixture of
everything,
an older kit plus resin plus metal. So that the main turret for it is relatively self-contained. It's more or less one piece, and then the metals add. Yeah. Whereas this is
straight plastic.
And a lot of variation. So
it's new Battlefront.
Yeah.
And new Battlefront knows its plastic a lot better than it used to.
Yeah.
And they've been doing a lot of switching to plastic for various kits. I believe the last Centurion model they did was for Oil War, which was the shot cowl they did.
Yeah.
And that was a resin metal hybrid as well. And it wasn't particularly easy to put together. This is just really easy. I was able to do this without even any instruction manual.
Oh, well, that's always handy.
I was just looking at pictures going, that looks like that piece. So we'll stick that on.
Yeah, the pieces are fairly significant for a 1/100 scale. You're not dealing with multiple small parts that you can have to worry about where they're going to go. I suppose the only thing are the ERA blocks.
Yeah.
When you're looking at those.
So I'm on the wrong car. There we go. I tried to press buttons and it didn't work. So the tank in game.
Yep.
It's not going to be the almighty of anything.
Okay.
Because it's a generation behind everything that's currently in game, because you've got Leopard 2A6, you've got Abrams M1A2, you've got Challenger 1s floating around. Centurion really is at the end of its life as far as a serviceable main battle tank. That's reflected fairly well in the game too, because it's It's got the 105 L7 gun, which is only anti-tank 19.
Mm.
If you're fighting against some of the later, heavier, bigger Soviet stuff, you're going to struggle with that. It does make it cheap, though.
Mm.
It is a fairly cheap vehicle. We won't be talking about that, but you can take quite a few of them in the Swedish forces. When you're looking at playing them with the Danish, they don't get their they don't get ERA, so they don't have that rule anymore because they're using an older version of it. I think it's still a 105. Yeah, it's still a 105 gun, but it's a little bit cheaper because it doesn't have that extra armor and stuff like that on it. So it's a good option, but if you really want to theme your list against something like Centurions and that sort of thing, then absolutely go for it. Go ham.
Interesting stuff.
So, yeah. And it's got most of the rules that you would expect from a main battle tank now. It's got brutal because it's firing a good solid round. ERA because it's the Swedish one. Infrared, we should all know what infrared is. Laser rangefinder, so no penalty to hit over 16 inches. Stabilizer, that sort of stuff, and can shoot smoke. So
handy to have then.
Yep.
Also, with this being obviously a Centurion, I imagine this is going to feature prominently in a lot of other lists beyond the Nordic. So
yeah,
pushing into Northag and Centag
well, maybe not so much because you have the British at the time were completely switched to chieftain.
Oh, they'd already moved.
They'd already moved. The Centurion sort of went out of fashion with the British in the late 60s. Because around the time when chieftain, there was the big switch over to chieftain, and then after that.
So by the time you hit mid-80s for Team Yankee, they've already sold off the ongoing concern that was the Centurion. Oh, right, okay.
Well, they were doing. I like to joke that Centurion was the second best export Britain did, next to the Mini. So
it's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, superb vehicle.
Yeah. So we have one more tank, and this time we're going fully Swedish.
We're going full Swedish.
We're going all the Svenska all the time.
Yep.
And this is, I suppose, what you would think is an iconic tank.
I would definitely call it quirky. It's one of the more unique Cold War era vehicles ever built because it's a tank without a turret, and everyone went, "What are you doing that for?"
well, here's my first question then. So obviously, when people are playing World War II, they always get hammered if they call anything armored a tank if it doesn't have a turret. So with the S tank being turretless, is it a change in sort of doctrine that means that how tanks are viewed? They don't require a turret. You don't have dedicated tanks and dedicated tank destroyers or tank hunters like you used to, or is it just a quirk that they decide this was going to be their main battle tank and they're going to call it a tank regardless of what its designation should actually be?
I think the term tank is just what it is.
Yeah.
It was designed to fight.
A little one-piece hull.
Yeah, it was designed to fight other armored vehicles. So it, in lieu of anything else, it really is a tank.
Yeah.
The fact that they took the time to design this thing based on what the terrain was like in Sweden.
Yeah.
That's what gives it this really quirky end result. You get a turretless vehicle that can go hull down to the point where I think maybe a foot of the vehicle can be visible over ground.
Yeah.
When it actually goes gun down, it's very, very short and very, very hard to see.
Because it had suspension that allowed it to raise up, so that the front declines. The suspension allows it to raise, so it can creep right up to either low hills or, I suppose, snowbanks and drifts and the like, and then raise itself so it's only showing the very lowest of profiles.
And what it can do is it can level itself up on a reverse slope of something. So it can drive itself up and then level itself off while sitting on the reverse slope.
Okay.
So once it fires, it just reverses itself back down again.
So at no point is it skylining itself to counter fire.
That's what makes this thing so unique and so weird, because everyone's seen it come out and went, tank destroyer? Like us World War II guys would look at it and go, Stug.
Yes.
Or Jagdpanzer.
Yeah.
But it's not classified as that. It's classified as a tank. And this is Sweden Sweden have had a long relationship with Centurion.
Mm.
They bought Centurion quite prolifically.
Mm.
And then they realized, right, we need something that's going to fit our needs more. And this is where tank design really does start to break up in nations that aren't necessarily fully allied or fully members of NATO at the time. Every separate little country that isn't NATO affiliated is kind of going, what do we need?
Yes.
Rather than what is NATO going to sell us?
Mm-hmm.
And the S-Tank is like one of the perfect examples of that, because you have the hilly terrain, the snowy terrain, the weird layout of everything out there, and this just sort of fits. It also fits with their doctrine of we don't want to attack, we want to defend.
It's a defensive tank to protect their nation.
Yeah.
It looks like it goes together relatively simply then. There's not a huge amount of moving parts, so to speak.
No, there's absolutely nothing that moves once it's all glued together, which is great. You glue it all together and you're done. And it's such a nice, pleasant little kit to build. It doesn't take as much time as, say, a Centurion would take to build.
Yeah. Not having to put a turret on things just helps out so much.
It really does. Thank you, Sweden.
You've got a built one of these as well we can take a look at.
So we'll chuck that in. Now, there is one thing I want to point out. I've been looking through the book, and in the book they have a couple of pictures of an S-Tank, this model, sitting on the reverse slope of a piece of terrain, and the wheels are modeled at an angle.
Right, yes.
And I'm kind of hoping that when we see a full box, we get that as an optional part.
Oh, that'd be nice.
But overall, it's quite a large vehicle, like the actual size of the thing.
Yeah,
I'll chuck a Centurion
or Centurion, yeah.
It's got quite the footprint. Where they've obviously went, well, we're not going to be making it tall, so we need to make it wider to fit everything in. And it is just such a charm.
Yeah, it's a fantastic little tank for the game as well. Do you want to tell us a bit about how it's armed then?
So it's armed with a version of the British L7 105. So it has a 105 gun. It's better than Centurions at being anti-tank 21, with a halted rate of fire of 2, which is basically standard. It does, because it's a turretless vehicle, it's only forward firing, so it's in your frontal arc. Yeah. Which doesn't matter so much, because I think modern Team Yankee and modern Flames, your frontal arc is a 180 off the front.
It's everything straight off the back of that, yeah. Or off the front of it, rather.
Yeah, so it's not too bad. It's not the most heavily armored vehicle, being front armor 12, so there's a lot of things, like particularly RPG teams and stuff, could get through the front of it. What makes the S-Tank special, and it's something when I first seen it, I was like, I initially looked at the stat card and went, it doesn't feel like an S-Tank. And then Shay very happily pointed out it's got an ambush tank rule, it's got slat armor, and it's amphibious.
Oh, okay.
So ambush tank, this is it, great, because on the standard stat card, it's a 4+ to hit.
Yeah.
So ambush tank, if stationary, team can remain gone to ground while shooting its main gun.
Oh, that's filth.
Yes.
Just right off the bat, that.
Yeah. That makes it, because it's gone to ground, that makes it a 5 if it's in open terrain. If it's in cover, it's 6. If it's in a forest, it's basically unhittable.
Yeah. Loving that. Yeah. In every way, shape, or form.
So the tank itself hasn't got a lot of survivability, but it has that feel of, I'm going to sit here and I can strong arm a piece of the table and just sit there and let you come at me. Obviously, forward firing is what it is.
What's its speed like? Because I always imagine, and this may just be because of the way it's designed and its role, I always imagine to be relatively quick in comparison to others.
Well, let's have a look at Centurion by example. So the tactical move is 10 inches. That's what it is across the board. It immediately changes when you're looking at dashes. So terrain dash for Centurion is 12. Terrain dash for S-Tank is 16.
All right, yeah, it is quick.
Yeah. Cross-country dash for the S-Tank is 24.
Wow.
So it can really, really rock it.
Fire and maneuver.
And road dash is 28.
Yeah. Don't put it on a road. If you put it on a road, people will see you and shoot at you. Keep
it behind cover. Use that dash to get between terrain elements, and then just set up somewhere that your opponent really isn't going to enjoy being. So
it's an interesting trio of tanks
Yeah.
for the Nords, for Team Yankee. I seen an S-tank being cleaned one day at the Army Museum in Stockholm, and there was a guy standing on top of the Henry Hoover, hoovering the dust off, which was a thing to behold. But yeah, it is such an iconic looking tank, and I imagine people will be fielding as many as they can across the board, because it's both mainline, distinctive, and fairly tough at its job. I mean, that gun plus that speed and the inconvenience of people attempting to hit you, they're going to have to send infantry in and try and slap things on the side of you.
Yeah. I think that's the way I would deal with it, because as a Swedish player, you're going to want to keep these.
Yeah,
you want to keep these at range in cover, just to really hammer home the fact that you're better than everyone. You know?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, overall 3 excellent looking kits, and very interesting as well, with especially how they decided to go with the Marksman, because I'm a big fan of AA. Even in games where I know my opponent isn't going to be bringing aircraft, I always bring it because
it's cheap anti-infantry. Well, it's anti-infantry.
It's great anti-infantry, so it will always find a home on my battlefields regardless. And just the mix of Soviet, Swiss, German, British coupled together to make that Finnish anti-air is just amazing. I love it to bits. But we're going to throw it over to you. What do you think of the new kits from Battlefront and the Nordic forces that are incoming? I believe John has been sitting down with Shay and doing a bit of list building as well, so you should be seeing that in the not too distant. But until then, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.